Joanne Glaser. I pastor 3 small churches in rural West Virginia. That was their solution to trying to find a pastor, was for 3 churches to yoke together, and that's how I can be there. This is Chris Helio. She is the Christian educator for Kanawha United Presbyterian Church, which is in downtown Charleston. And both of us have been involved in Christian education for a long time. Many years. But I want to ask you this first. How many of you all are from what you would consider a large church? Okay. How many of you all consider what I would call a medium-sized church, which would be like the 100 to 200 range? Oh. Which is Presbyterian definition of small church. How about like 50 to 100? And then what I serve, what I call them, are micro churches, which are 20 or less. Because we don't really qualify as small, but we're Bible, and so we call ourselves micro churches. But all 3 of my churches are very, very active in mission and in Christian education, in the church itself and also in the communities. And so I really want to do a little rah-rah for those churches that think, I'm just too small to do anything. I have a 20-member church who serves 200 people a meal once a month. I have a small church who prepares and serves an elegant dinner to anyone who is over 60 once a month, and we usually have about 80 people there. I have a small church who serves 74 children in an after-school program. So small churches can do a whole lot. They just need to have some inspiration and just that idea that, with God, you all can do anything. And to remember. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today, is some of these things that we're going to be able to do. So let us begin together today with a prayer. Wonderful, holy God, we gather here together as we are truly trying to hear your message, to go out and teach others what you have taught us. Help us as we learn, help us as we grow to hear your voice, to guide us in the direction and the way that you know that we can serve our churches and our communities. We pray in the name of our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, we have a handout for you all. My handout. And I'm just going to go through some basics about, if you're thinking about doing Christian education in your church, and you're not currently doing it, where do you start? Sometimes that's the problem. You really feel this burning desire to do something, but you don't know where to begin. And you've got to first of all get over that hump that says you can't do it because you can. And then just get a plan and start going with it. The very first page is actually a bibliography. And one of the things for a Christian education program, a lot of times you're worried because, we don't have any money, we don't have any resources. There are oodles and oodles and oodles of free resources online. So you have a lot of websites on here that you can go to and get free information, free curriculum, free lesson plans, and ideas of things you can do. Plus also, like you see it says places to obtain resources, and you see Amazon. You can get anything from Amazon now. I just ordered stickle and little jewels to use for crafts off Amazon. Amazon has everything, but they really do have some very inexpensive Christian education curriculum. You don't have to go, I shouldn't say this, you shouldn't have to go to the Presbytery resources or the Cokesbury, which have really good resources, but you can find a lot of times the same thing a lot more inexpensively. So these are some good places to look, and I know a lot of these have just like handouts and all kinds of things that you can use for Christian education. So it just takes some time to kind of do some exploration looking for that. So if you'll turn the page, we're going to talk a little bit about where you start. How many of you all have no Christian education program right now, but you're really looking to do something? Anybody? Okay, that would be you. How many of you all have some Christian education, but you're trying to help it to grow or diversify or to look at different ways you can do it? That's far more than most of you, but that's okay. So, when you start thinking about doing Christian education in your church, you've got to sort of start thinking about what that is. What is Christian education? You may talk.
Bible study.
Bible study.
Sunday school class.
Sunday school class.
Small groups.
Small groups.
Music.
Music.
Values clarification.
Okay.
Youth group.
Youth group.
And those are all kinds of strategies of Christian education, but I would argue that it's forming people after the ways of Jesus.
Very good. Very good.
That's the goal of it. It's not just to have programs.
Exactly. And the thing is, we have, over the course of time, sort of categorized Christian education into those youth group, Bible study, Sunday school, when there are so many other ways to form disciples and to teach and to do things that will help people better understand what it does mean to follow Jesus. And so that's one of the things you have to start thinking about is you don't have to plug yourself into what has always been. So you can start thinking about different ways to do that education and different ways to be able to share that with others. The question on here is, and you answer that, what's the purpose of Christian education? It's not just to teach somebody that Noah built an ark. It's to teach somebody what it means to follow Jesus and to do that. I will tell you a little bit about my after-school program. I did tell you that one of my churches, 20-member church, we have an after-school program once a week. We have currently on the roll 74 children. God will never send them all to me at the same time because we don't even have a room this big. It's not this big for these kids. And what we do with them is they come, they have a snack, we have worship. We have a full 25-minute worship service. They are acolytes. They take up an offering. They hand out bulletins. And we were very fortunate to find a lady in our community who's a ventriloquist. She has a dummy, you know Charlie McCarthy? She has a dummy just like that, who dresses in different things each week, depending upon the lesson. But what she does is she teaches a Bible, she talks about a Bible story as herself. And then Anderson comes out, and Anderson tells the kids what this looks like as they go through their day at the elementary school. So, there really is taking that story and making it discipleship in the minds of these kids. So that's what we have to keep in mind. When it says here, what do you want an individual to understand by the time they are different ages? So does it matter whether they're 7 or 77? What do they still all need to learn? Discipleship. How do you take the Bible study and the Sunday school and make it something for everyday life? It's not as easy as it sounds, but that's what our goal is. So when you think about having a Christian education program in your churches, that's what you want to focus on. Is how do we turn these people into disciples? Instead of just, let's argue about whether it was 40 days or not, that they were on the ocean, the water, or whatever. I can't say specifically what your church wants to know. When you're talking about Christian education, education, what do you want them to talk about? What do they desire to know? Do they want to know a Bible story, or do they want to understand what atonement is? Do you understand what atonement is? But is it sometimes in our Christian education we want to take it to the next level? They've heard the Noah story 100 times. Now, what does that mean? What about theology? And even little kids can start to understand theology. What did it mean that Jesus died on the cross? And what difference does that make? And you'd be surprised when you teach children the story and then start talking to them about it, how they have a really clear understanding sometimes that we don't even see. So you think about, what the purpose of the Christian education is. You think specifically about what you want people to know, whether it's kids or adults. And then you start thinking about, who is this for? Oftentimes we limit ourselves to thinking it's for us and for our church. And we really need to think about what's in our communities. Of the 74 children who come to our after-school program, not one single child comes to our church. You stop one of them in the street and they'll say to you that they come to our church. It's just that they come on Thursdays. And one of them one time said, we were talking about something and they said, you do this on Sundays too? I thought, wow, that's kind of neat though that they're thinking that way. One of the leaps that our congregation had to make was thinking, okay, we're going to start this program and all these kids are going to start coming to church, thinking they're going to all start coming to worship on Sundays. And then it finally sank into them that these kids were coming to church. It's just they were coming on Thursdays instead of Sundays. So if you're wanting to start a Christian education program or develop a Christian education program simply to try to get more people into worship, it's not going to work. Your goal has to be trying to build disciples, whether it's on Thursdays or Tuesdays or whenever you might do it. And, we always send home some little bulletins and stuff with these kids, thinking that because none of their maybe just a couple of their parents go to church somewhere. So we think, well, they'll take these little leaflets home, they'll ask their parents to help them do them, and you never know when parents are going to start hearing that message through their children. So when you think about Christian education, again, don't think about it as something that's just for your church, for you all to do. Look at your community and see who you might be able to reach in that community. I mean, it's the same thing with our after 60s dinner and with our free lunches. None of those people come to our worship, but they still feel like they're a part of the church. And that's an important thing to think about. We're not getting any financial thing out of these people or anything else, but they still see that as somewhere that they go as their particular church. So think about that when you're thinking about who your program is going to be for. And it's not that we don't need Christian education within our own churches, because unless you have a good foundation yourself, it's hard for you to be able to communicate that. But don't always think that that's what the purpose is. So the next question is, where do we start? And I think, this was specifically supposed to be about children's ministry. So where would you start? If you're thinking about developing a children's ministry, where do you start when you start thinking about it?
You look for people that share that passion.
Right, you have to have it. You can't do it by yourself. You have to have people willing to invest themselves. Now, small church. Remember, I have 20 people in my church. And you go, oh, 20 people can't do that. Let me tell you, it's amazing what 20 people can do. The lady that feeds them every week is 86. So, the first thing you have, I'm too old to work with those kids. You can't say, you'd be surprised what you're able to do. And who might be there that's willing to help if you just go out and say, we're looking to do this. And see, I've got ladies that are homebound that I take them all the little things that you have to cut out and stuff, and they sit at home and they cut out little hands and little triangles and animals. And what did you cut out for me once?
I cut out all those circles and triangles.
Oh, that's right.
Because you weren't cutting them straight.
That's right. I am not good at cutting things straight. But think about, there are people that can do things that don't have to be, I'm 61 and I'm still running around with these little kids. You can do that. Don't ever think you're too old to not be able to work with these little kids. And they really respect older. We all have women, but it doesn't mean men can be there too. That's Avis's kitchen, and let me tell you, when they come to get food on that after-school program, they do what Avis says. And Avis is the old school, where you will behave. And they do. So don't limit yourself thinking that you're too old or too young. Everybody can get involved in one way or another. So, what does our church know or really do well that will increase the spiritual life of those you're aiming to serve? Not every church can do a children's ministry. And one of the church that does the after 60s dinner every month sat for at least a year struggling over the fact they had no children in their church, they had no youth in the church, and oh my gosh, we can't do anything because we don't have any children or youth. How many have heard that? Our goal is to get children and youth in this church. It may not be. After a year of struggling and thinking and praying, they realized that their ministry was to older adults. It was not to children. Christian education does not have to be strictly to... There are older people who need to hear the story of Noah. So look at your areas and see where that deficiency may be. One church that I know of really well decided that they were by a college campus. And instead of going after the college kids, which would be your first thought, right? They went after the professors. Because that's who matched the people in their church. And they realized none of these professors went to church anywhere and needed to hear the gospel. And so that's where they began to concentrate their Christian education type activities. So they did some really scholarly type classes and stuff, and they would come, and it really worked out. So really think about what your congregation is good at. And don't assume it has to be children or youth, because there are other people out there that need to hear about Jesus just as much as children and youth do. It may be young adults, it may be young married couples. There's all kinds of avenues out there that you can do, that you can reach out to. So take some time to look and to think about what do we do good? The ladies that do the after 60s dinner all have, we sat there and thought, what do we do good? And we thought, they cook. There's all these old people that, I shouldn't have said that. All these elderly people that are looking for people just to share a meal with. And we cook really well. Why don't we? So that's where you have to look. And again, I think sometimes we just assume that Christian education looks like this. It looks a certain way. But it doesn't have to. Look at different things and different abilities and what you're good at and where you are and where the needs may be. So you have a who and a what. So now you have to think about when, where, how often, and how long. Does Christian education have to be every week? Because that's what we always think, right? Sunday school. Sunday school is does it have to be? Does Sunday school have to be on Sundays?
Didn't Jesus say that?
Somewhere. And it had to be at 10 o'clock. You know, we live in a culture now that does not schedule its life around Sunday mornings. So in order to reach adults, children, whatever, sometimes you may have to think, well, maybe if we did it on a Sunday evening or a Wednesday evening, families would come because they can't do it because what do we have now every Sunday morning, at least in West Virginia?
Soccer.
Soccer, exactly. So short of me going to a soccer field every Sunday morning and grabbing people and going, okay, you have to go to church. You know, maybe the church needs to think about
Having the Bible study at the soccer field.
that. I actually have thought about that before. So, you know, we need to think about different things like that. One of the programs that we did, and we did it for about 3 or 4 years until, you know, things just kind of waned off, is that we had, whenever there was a day off school, like, you know, President's, I don't know what they do in Tennessee, we have like President's Day off and Martin Luther King Day off. We would have,
Snow days off.
huh?
And snow days.
Well, we couldn't do it on snow days because the church is up on a hill and if there's snow, we can't get up there. But we had a program for the children from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Just on the days when there wasn't any school.
Wow.
And let me tell you, we got huge numbers of kids because, A, parents are going, wow, I've got somewhere to send my kids. You know, and instead of having Sunday school, we did Sunday school a day, you know, whenever there was a day off school. We did it for children for a while, and then we did it for youth for a while. High school, middle school age kids. And it always, both things always included a mission project of some kind for these kids. So you can think of these things in different ways. They don't have to be every Sunday morning or every Sunday evening or Wednesday evenings or those traditional times that we think about. Think about different times that you could get these kids into your church that they wouldn't, you know, they'd just be off looking for something else to do. So again, it's another of thinking things through. So we had the how, and we had the who, and we've had the when. Now we have to have, oh, there was a where question there. Does your Christian education always have to be in your church?
No.
In your building? Can it be somewhere else? Sure.
Coffee at 3 o'clock is shame.
Exactly right, see? There's a lot, you could take your people from your church to the community center and have something there if it's in the middle of an area where the kids could walk. We've done some successful things in the park during the summer where we've taken it down to the park in the middle of town, and we get all kinds of kids because they just kind of wander in because they don't know what's going on. So think about sometimes that this Christian education that you're trying to do doesn't have to be in your building. We have a church that's not Presbyterian, but they have, because they called it something that doesn't sound churchy, actually has an after-school club at one of the elementary schools, and it's actually a Bible study. But they can get by with it because they didn't call it like Bible study. They called it something else, and they've got like 20 kids that come, you know, to their room in the elementary school after school 1 day a week and have Bible study. So they go to them. So think about different places you can have this Christian education, whether it be kids or adults. Adults love to go to coffee houses, you know, to have conversation and to talk. We have a group that meets, it's not affiliated with our church, but they meet at McDonald's on Wednesday mornings at 8 o'clock. And they have a Bible study. So, you know, do things like that. You don't like McDonald's?
No. We've got a group like
Oh, do
that.
you really? It works. It really works, you know? And, you know, there are people out there that have this stigma about walking into a church building that don't think a thing about walking into McDonald's. So, you know, think about different places you can do this. But now we have to go to the curriculum question. We're bad examples because we have a tendency to write our own curriculum because it's free. But we've had
Too many years.
a few years of experience in doing that. You've talked about what you want these people to know. So then you've got to have some kind of materials to be able to use to do the teaching. Yes and no. How many know the story of Noah? Okay, now do you need to go buy something to tell children the story of Noah? You don't, do you? So that curriculum is free. You know the story of Moses and all those different things. Kids will sit around you and listen to these stories because most of them they haven't heard of. A lot of them they haven't heard of. And more than once they've looked at me and gone, is that true? Yes, it is. Wow. These kids that don't know these stories will listen. And you know the stories. So you don't have to buy something to read to tell them. Just tell them the story. And if it's not 100% accurate, I don't think God's going to smite you because you said it rained for 38 days instead of 1. The idea is what? To get the to get the message across, to let them know, to hear this stuff. And then again, online they've got all kinds of stuff. If you type in Noah Children's Lesson on your search engine,
You can even add the word reformed.
yeah.
And you'll get it, so it's...
And you'll get all kinds of ideas about stuff you can do that you have laying around. You have old socks, and you have egg cartons, and you have milk jugs, and it'll, Next week we're going to do, we did Jonah and the Whale we made with milk jugs. Catching, what do you call it? You put the ball in one thing and you throw it and catch it the other side. How much, that cost us a little rubber ball, But that was our Jonah and the Whale activity. We just said one Sunday morning, we need some milk jugs next week. And guess what we got? Lots of milk jugs. So there's lots of things you can do that don't cost you anything, because sometimes we think, oh my gosh, we just can't do this because we can't buy all these prepackaged stuff that they try to sell us. And I know I shouldn't say that, but it's, you buy that prepackaged stuff, what a lot of times, then it says you have to buy milk jugs and balls and all those kinds of things. So don't think you have to get a lot of stuff in order to do these. Even with adults, there are some wonderful discussion question sheets that you can get online for free or for very low cost. There's a little series of books called Life Guide. Have y'all ever heard of those? They started out with like 20, now they've got like 1 billion over any topic that you may want to know. And they're excellent little books for adults. They have questions, and then the adults look it up in the Bible, and then they talk about it. And it doesn't take a teacher. It doesn't take somebody who's got this great vast knowledge, because it guides you through it step by step. So sometimes, we think, well, we can't have an adult class because we don't have a teacher. Or I don't want to teach because I don't know enough. A little resource I think these little books are like $6 a piece. A little resource like that you can just hand to somebody and say, read the question. You don't have to know anything, just read the question. You can use those. So don't let curriculum be a barrier to trying to start something to do with kids or adults or anybody like that.
Where did you find these books? Did you say you find them online?
Mm-hmm. Life Guide is InterVarsity Press, I believe, is who publishes those. But again, you type in Noah adult study questions, and you'd be surprised how many little hits you would get and things that you can use. The internet's a valuable resource. Now, in the middle of nowhere where I live, sometimes the internet can be an issue. And I don't know about your all's churches or how well you all are connected, but I sometimes have to drive to McDonald's to use the internet. But that's okay. I'm sure there's somebody, even in the little tiny churches, that can get online and can look things up and do things like that.
Life Guide is InterVarsity.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. See? He looked it up.
Internet. What?
Did you say it again?
Life Guide, the one she was talking about, is InterVarsity Press.
InterVarsity.
InterVarsity.
IVPs.
IVP.
IVP,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's just like IVP.com or something.
Yeah.
So we talked about who's going to do it. Okay, we've decided that we want to do something with children after school once a month. Who's going to do it?
It's your idea, Pastor.
That's often what happens, but do you have a pastor?
She
You? Okay. You're in the same boat I've been in.
Except out of my 3 churches, but
I do have 3 churches, so it is kind of interesting. It's a hard question sometimes, and what I ran into when we started thinking about these things was the idea that I'm not qualified, I don't know enough, I'm not sure kids will relate to me. There's a million excuses as to why you can't pick up and start trying to do this. But if you sit down with a legal pad and a pen, or however you think through things, you'd be surprised at what you can do. And like you said, you find somebody that's got the same passion you do, you start talking about it during your worship, and people will come. One of the things I'm going to mention later, but I'll mention it now, if God wants you to do this ministry, it's going to happen. And the people are going to be there. And the resources are going to be there. So make sure that you remember that. We're not in this by ourselves. What's the difference between us and the Girl Scouts? Is that we have God helping us do these things. And unless we really believe that, it's not going to work. But who would have ever thought a 20-member congregation could serve 74 kids in a room that's not even this big? But with God, it happens. And I worry every week, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It always works out. So if you've got the passion for doing this, it's just a matter of starting to talk to people about it. And you have to be enthusiastic about it, and you have to believe you can do it. Because if I go up to you and go, I want to start this Christian education thing, but I don't know if we can really do it or not. What are you going to say to me? You'll go someplace else. So you have to I've got this great idea, and I think we can really do this. And then when the naysayers come, I don't think we can do this. What do you have to do? You have to go, yes, we can. You have to stay pumped up about it. And it will happen. Now, some of us are better at that pumped up thing than others are. And they always know when I come in a room and I look like this, that, oh no, she's got another idea, and now we're going to have to do something. But it always works out. And that's what I say on here. Share it with your congregation. Don't just think that you have to do it yourself. Share it around. Talk to people. And what if you really wanted to do it yourself, and someone comes up and you realize that they're going to be better at it than you are? What do?
Sing the doxology.
And that happens. So, let it just kind of percolate around for a while and see what kind of falls out. Under the more part, I do kind of say that don't forget to include God in the process. That's the advantage we have. We have God. And if you pray about it and you think about it and you really look at things and talk, what God wants you to do is going to rise up to the surface. What happens when it's not what you thought it was going to be? The one church that I told you did all this praying and discernment to find out what they wanted to do, and they really thought they were supposed to be doing youth and kids, and they ended up doing older adults. They were kind of disappointed for a while. But then, they said, well, okay, that's what we're supposed to do, and they started building it, and now, it's a really a nifty thing. We've been doing it for 14 or 15 years now. Every fourth Tuesday of every month, we have 60 to 80 people that come for a nice dinner. And we do some Christian education during that dinner. It's usually something really small, but they still hear about Jesus and they still pray. And lots of them are unchurched. And you never know when something's just going to click. Don't be afraid to try, and don't be afraid to fail. So you have this idea, and it's really great, and you start to try it, and you do it the first day, and nobody comes. And your whole balloon just sort of deflates. Or you've been doing something for 6 years, and all of a sudden you realize it's just starting to fade away. That's okay. You haven't failed. It's just time for something new. So you close it out, you thank God that you were able to do it for as long as you did, and you move on and see what now God wants you to do. Don't be distracted by numbers. The after-school program that I talked about, we had 74 kids. We started with 3. For 3 years, I think we had 3 kids. And then the next year, all of a sudden, we had 12. And we thought, wow, this is really exciting. And then it just kind of began to grow. So don't think if you have 3 kids the first time you try something that you failed. 3 kids is 3 kids. 3 adults is 3 adults. That's 3 more people that might be hearing something that wouldn't have heard it. What did Jesus say? Did Jesus say you can only listen to my message if you've got 50 people? Or did he say where 2 or more are gathered? So if you're teaching 3 kids, celebrate that. And don't think that you have to have a lot of people in order for it to be a success. Even in the middle of a big town, you may only get, if I get 3 kids, out in the middle of nowhere, I'm, wow, 3 kids. I didn't know there was 3 kids in this area. But, even in bigger towns, sometimes that's what you get. Use each other. That's the other thing I want to say. You're a small rural church. There's a big church 20 miles down the road. Don't feel like, well, I'm not going to ask them. But, they've probably got 19 closets full of old curriculum that's been laying there for 10 years because nobody bothers to clean it up.
Yes.
And guess what you can do with that old curriculum? The stories haven't changed, have they? Is Noah different now than he was 10 years ago? And if you look at most of that curriculum, it's just the same story. So you can borrow it, they'll probably give it to you. Oh, please, take this curriculum out of our closet. So ask around. I don't know, and our Presbytery is very willing to send out emails to all the different churches. So if I want a curriculum, I decided next year we need to study Jesus as the light of the world. And the Presbytery will send out an email that says, does anybody have any curriculum that they'd like to get rid of on this topic? And you will get inundated with phone calls saying, Sure. And you may have to go pick it up. You know? Y'all aren't very big though, are you? West Virginia, that's an issue because our presbytery is huge. Geography-wise, people-wise, but we're huge. But still, use each other as resources. If you've never done something and you want to know how to do it, send an email out and say, I'd really like to start this. Does anybody have any experience in this? Can you help me? We are Presbyterians. We are connected with one another. And so we can use each other to help one another.
The children's director at our church has done this thing where she has, every year, like 10 different publishers put out their own VBS, which is so funny because it's almost like tricked us into saying, I can only use this year's VBS this year during the summer. And she's done this thing where we've canceled the week-long VBS, but what she does, and the reason is just because it was a lot of money and time for something that it wasn't accomplishing what we wanted, but she's taken previous year's curriculums and used them as Sunday school curriculum because they use the core of the stories, and there's churches that just have, VBS curriculum just laying around. And just because mine did some weird thing about a rabbit flying 5 years ago, doesn't make it, I'll give it to you if you want. Yeah.
Exactly, there you go,
Yeah.
see? And again, like I said, VBS doesn't have to be traditional.
Yeah.
One of my churches decided to do VBS one year, and they just couldn't find a week that everybody could be there, so they did VBS every Thursday night through the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And when kids could get there, they came. And when they couldn't, they couldn't.
Yeah.
And we had the same number of kids each week, but it was very seldom the same kids.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And we used old VBS curriculum that someone had given us. So you just have to start thinking untraditional Christian education and thinking of different ways that you can do things.
Speaking of VBS, our church decided last year they didn't want to purchase curriculum because of the expense. And we had one person who said, we can do this. We know about the family of God. And decided to make it intergenerational just over a weekend, like a Friday night and Saturday. And bless her heart, she found people who would be willing to do the adult section and helped me find books for the preschoolers, and there were maybe 3 kids outside of our regular group, but everyone seemed to enjoy it and seemed to learn something from it. And I think there was a real sense of accomplishment that people were able to be creative about it.
And you do have to do that. You do have to, when you do something and it works, you need to celebrate it. And you need to really, and it's not so much pointing out, names and peoples. It's just, as a congregation, look what we did. Because that really empowers you to be able to do something else. So if we did that, maybe we can. So celebrate those things. Take a moment in worship to thank God for this program that you're doing and for God's guidance, and, because it really does help. It really does make a difference. I'm trying to see if there was anything else in mind. How am I supposed to do? I do want to, some things do happen though with these programs. My after school program, I do have to tell you this because it's really the nifty thing. We have a guy in our community who's wealthy. He has his own business and all this stuff. Heard about the after school program, decided that he thought that since all these kids were unchurched that they needed Bibles. So at the end of every year, he buys all of the kids who were new that year their own Bible. And we have this little celebration at the end, and he gives them each a Bible to take home and keep. And so, sometimes people just can see what you're doing and things will come. Again, God just works a lot of different ways to help out. So, I'm done. It's your turn. Do you have any questions yet?
I have not given up on the idea that old and young could learn together.
Oh, sure.
And I guess I need to just to hear a word of affirmation from you, because all your illustrations that included have been age group. But I'm assuming you're with me that you're not
Mine
going to
are
be.
more combined.
She's going to combine you. But I will say this, it was amazing one time when we had some little kids and some middle school kids and some high school kids together, and we think, oh, these high school kids, they're hard to deal with, and so we had the little kids cutting out stuff and pasting and gluing. Those high school kids thought that was the most fun ever, because they don't ever get to do stuff like that. So don't think because something looks childish that even adults don't want to. We colored, Presbyterian women last year, the study had a color sheet with it. You'd be surprised how those ladies loved to color those color sheets each week. Oh, we get to color again? So intergenerational does, we think sometimes that people won't respond to things that they really just kind of can relax and enjoy doing. But she's going to talk more about intergenerational. So
I wondered about advertising your after-school group, where you started with the core and how you...
to be honest, we really didn't advertise. We started with those 3 kids, and I'm not really sure where they came from, to be honest. I think I'll try this, and these 3 kids came because they knew people in the church. And from there, it was just word of mouth. I will tell you one of the advantages of being in rural West Virginia is that our elementary school really cooperates with us in helping us get the kids to the church, which in a lot of places you just can't do. So we do have that advantage that other places can't. Because we didn't try to do one of the other churches. The elementary school was across the street, and they wouldn't even allow us to walk kids across the street because it was to church. So
That was going to be my question. How do you transport it? How are all those kids transported?
as long as you don't tell anybody,
Church.
we get them on a school bus.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And then you take them back home?
No, their parents do come. Somebody comes and picks them up.
Okay.
We get them right after school, which is about 2:30, and then parents or
Does
somebody,
the school system provide a bus for you?
they sort of sneak them on the bus that goes by the church anyway. Like I said, don't tell anybody.
That happened in Kentucky. We had a children's choir. They met right after church, and the bus brought them right there, stopped right in front of the church.
Yeah, the bus just drops them
It's a
off.
small town,
Right there, because we have a bus driver who really supports the program, and he lets them on his bus, and so, I can see the day where maybe that might not, but that is one of our advantages.
Do you think it's different out in rural areas compared to in more urban areas or suburban areas because there are less things for the children to be doing?
Oh, no.
No. It's not.
We have, our kids are like everybody else's. There's basketball and soccer and, baseball and all this kind of things. And one of the things that we have learned to do is to we've kind of condensed our schedule from October to Easter, because before October we couldn't get kids playing sports. After Easter they kind of go off. So we have kind of had to, but just to show you how strange things are, one basketball coach will not have his practice on Thursdays because he knows so many of the kids are coming to the after-school program. So, it sometimes, but yeah, our kids are just as busy as everybody else. But something's clicked with this program. Something has just clicked. Any other questions? Then I'm turning it over to Chris.
My situation's a little bit different than Joanne's. I started my career, my ministry in a small coastal town in southern Georgia, a very small church. And then by moving to West Virginia, we moved to one of the larger churches in West Virginia. And I worked there for 13 years. And then moved to two of the small, what we call, Presbyterian Church classifies as small, but medium-sized churches, both of them in the 100 to 200 person range. And that 200 level ceiling is really hard to break because churches have a hard time identifying, are we still that matriarchal, patriarchal church? We try to hold on with our families. Well, we're really a pastor-led church, but we think we want to be a programmatic church. So we kind of get stuck in there, and all of the things Joanne talked about, as to starting a ministry or working with a ministry apply in the same way, except that how many of you all in these medium-sized churches 10, 15 years ago would have Sunday school class for every age group, several elementary, a middle school group, a high school group, and several adult groups? Your churches look like that now. Ours didn't look that way anymore. We had a few elementary and a few youth and 1 or 2 adult classes. And it wasn't the same kids all the time necessarily. There was a core group we could depend on always being there. And we had to stop and think, what did we want our education program to look like? So we spent some time studying and thinking. The church I serve right now is downtown Charleston. It's as urban, I use that word very lightly, as West Virginia cities can be. But we are the big city. Church is located downtown, right in Church Alley. The church that during the Civil War said we're going to sympathize with the Southerners and marched down the street and started their own church a block down is still there. So we have 2 Presbyterian churches, 1 on each corner. We have a large Catholic church across the street. We have an Episcopal church on the other corner, and 2 blocks over we have Big Baptist Temple and 2 large Methodist churches. So there's not any lack of churches. When we first started, we want to do Christian education and be strong. So we had to look at our own situation. Where do we want to be as a church? How do we serve the people in our church? Because before we can go out and think about those other people, we need to be strong in our own foundation. And I was reading an article the other day that made me think of how our process went. You know, bare aspirin is a very old remedy. And when it was first made, those tablets crumbled very easily. So the reason for that cotton that was in the bottles was to keep, when they were being delivered and loaded, to keep those aspirin tablets from crushing up. And that piece of cotton is down there, and it was very hard to get out. In 1989, bare aspirin started putting this coating so that they no longer crumbled. But guess what? It took 10 years for them to get rid of that piece of cotton. And so our program was a lot like that. How do we want to deal? What cotton do we need to get rid of? And we looked at the fact that on Sunday morning, we had 1 core group, particularly in the children and youth, that were there because they were there for the right reasons, or their parents were insistent that they were there for the right reasons. And I was finding I'm spending too much time catching up those children and youth that are there once a month. And it was to the detriment of those that are always there. So we decided, okay, we're going to focus our Sunday morning program on those that are there because they want to learn, they're invested in the class, and those that come infrequently, they're going to get something out of it too, even if we don't back up and bring them up to speed. And then Wednesday night, we found, a little bit different group. Our core kids are still there, but there's this other group that only comes on Wednesday nights. So it kind of became an opportunity to look at Christian education a little bit differently. So we started calling it Fun at Church Group. And we gave it a thematic form and a mission component, because what we were finding is not only our adults, but our youth particularly, even more so than the adults, didn't want to come and just hang out anymore. They really wanted value for their time. They're busy people. They have a lot of stresses in their life. So we found that if we had an opportunity for them to come, and we mixed all the age groups from little bitty to adults, and we have a Bible study component, we have a mission component, there's something thematic about it, and they're able to have value for that time. And it's really fun to watch the 2-year-old interact with the 80-year-old. I have one little guy, and he has his special coloring friend. And she's 80 years old, and she'll color with him anytime. So we see these things happening so that it's not that strict format anymore that we used to have on Wednesday night. And it suits those people that, you know, they're just not ready for the intense, but they're hungry. They want something. So we thought about, and I brought out all those old, how many of you remember the Prem curriculum? Brought out all those old posters and things because I tend to be somewhat of a pack rat. I might need it someday. And they have the big circles. One circle is worship, one circle is mission, and one circle is Christian education. And when you move them in together, your greatest ministry happens where the three circles intersect. So as a group we worked, and I talked to my youth group, I'd say, you know guys, you say you want Bible study. I spend all this time preparing it, and then you're not here. I'm missing the point somewhere. What is it? And we all hemmed and hawed. And finally somebody came up and said, you know, it's the timing. I said, when is the best time for you to come for Bible study? And they talked around, well, we have sports after school, we have homework, some of us have jobs. 9 o'clock on Tuesday night. I said, 9 o'clock on Tuesday nights. Well, you know, a lot of teachers give tests on Thursday and Friday. And, you know, Mondays are, you know, we're just getting back into it. So I said, okay, we'll give it a try. We're on like our 6th year now. And what happens is they do come. They're kind of ready to wind down. It's very casual. We gather, we talk a little bit, we have a Bible study. I say we're done at 10, I'm pushing them out the door at 10:15. I promise your parents you'll be home, you got to go. And what we found the more and more is some of them have begun bringing friends. Because, and they're not children, youth that come to the church. They, for the most part, have their own church. But that's a convenient time. So that was one of those wins, is trying to figure out, you know, you're hungry for it, but you're not coming. Why? And sometimes that's just a question. Ask your people. You say you want it, but you're not here. Why? Sometimes it's a very simple answer. Joanne's group, after school, they're in a rural area. Everybody goes to the same school. Our church is on the edge of the east end of Charleston, which at one point in time was a very affluent part of Charleston. And it has now, it's very mixed up. It has very affluent people. It also has some of the very poorest people. And we wanted to do something ministry-wise in the community. Other churches around us had clothes closets and food pantries and so forth. And what we focused on is we don't want to do something for the community, we want to do something with the community. So we went out and we started talking, asking, well, you know, we want our kids to have this, that, and the other. But the children that live in that area attend 3 different elementary schools, plus there's 2 private schools. The high school kids, they can choose one or the other. The middle school kids go 2 different directions from the same area. So we began to think, how can we partner with the community for Christian education? And what we came upon was the schools were not open to us doing things there and advertising. Because we are urban, we have to have separation of church and state. So what we do is we meet the children at the East End Resource Center, which is a place where the children can go after school. And they have programs there, certified teachers that do homework help and so forth. And we began to talk to some of the older adults in our church. How can we be part of the children's lives there? And a couple of our people are very musical. We have 3 adults that are classically operatic trained. We have several college professors that teach music. So we began a choir. And, well, that kind of led into, so we have some retired school teachers. So they had no read aloud program. So there became a read aloud program. Now we have some people that go over and help with some tutoring. We have a couple of young men that go and play basketball. And just, it's not Christian education per se, but what we do is we invite them back. The choir comes and sings every once in a while at worship and gives them an opportunity to come and be amongst the people. The children that we tutor, the children that just play basketball or hear read aloud. During the summer, we have 2 different Bible schools. We have one that we do in-house that's intense. Last year, we learned and practiced those Jewish rituals and festivals from the Old Testament for our children who we wanted to really expand their horizons in Christian education. And then we had a second Bible school that our kids helped with. And we invited the kids from the neighborhood to come, and we taught those basic Bible school stories. And it was a way for the people in our church to minister with. During the summer, we also, instead of fun at church group, we do prayers for the world. Most of the kids in our congregation come from wealthier families. They're off in Costa Rica or a month in Paris or wherever. But Prayers for the World, those children that come on Wednesday nights from the community. We meet once a week, and it's from 10 to 2, and we focus on somewhere in the world that needs prayer. And it's very thematic, but it's an opportunity for mostly our older adults to mix with those young people and to help them with an awareness that God is with us. It doesn't matter where you come from. God is with you, and you can pray, and you can be part, even if you're not with us every Sunday. And I think what we finally depended on was building relationships within the community. For years, I wanted to do a dinner there's a large homeless community, and there's also a lot of the people that live on the East End. They're that component that falls through the cracks. There's just not enough on minimum wage jobs to take care of their family. And I thought, we have so much. And these people need fed. The Episcopal Church across the school houses a ministry that feeds every day, breakfast and lunch, 365 days a week. But there's a long time between lunch and breakfast the next morning. And I kept saying, we could do a hunger ministry. We could feed people, at least some of the time. And maybe other churches will follow suit. And we've got a lot of churches. The session would say, but somebody has to cook. All of those naysayer questions. So I find a lot of times, if the adults are not enthusiastic and they don't see my vision, the children and youth get it. They are good. So we wrote a program, Bible school, we called it Festival of Faith. And the end of that Bible school program, where we had invited the community to be a part of, and a trickle came. But at the end of it, we said, okay, now we're going to feed hungry people. We've talked about missions all week. And it just became that first dinner was part of Bible school. The children and the youth, they hosted it. They did the cooking. It was simple. It wasn't anything fancy. And we had about 40 people. The community came. And some of the adults in the church said, hey, that was pretty neat. Maybe we should do that once a quarter. I said, okay. So the next time, a few more people and a few more people. Week before last, we served 160 people. And we can pretty much depend on that. And it's become very much an intergenerational project within the church. We have adults that love to come help with the final preparations and the serving and the fellowship. We encourage people to sit at the tables and talk with people, to be part of it. We pray, we talk church. The youth, they're there every time. They're part of the serving. Once a month they set up a sharing corner where things that they have collected from members of the church, People can have what they need, toiletries, socks, gloves, depending on the season of the year. So it's become a great sharing ministry within the church that just grew out of the fact that, you know, so often I say a child will lead them because they'll catch the vision first, and it becomes important to them, and they bring others in behind them. So we feel like we're a church now that's not just the church inside the doors. And we work more and more to be a church within the community, but we don't want to do for the community. We want to build relationships and do with. Too often we just think this community needs, but that need that we recognize is not necessarily the need that the community has. And as Joanne said, the people we're doing ministry with are not building the numbers. They are not increasing our stewardship, but they feel like they're part of us. If you ask them, what is your church? Where do you go to church? They go to church at Canal United, even though it's not on Sunday morning, and they don't have a membership. So those are some things that we've done and I think the hardest part was picking out the cotton. What are those things those sacred cows that we've done forever and ever, because that's what we always did. And how did we change? I write most of my own curriculum just because I get tired of the same old thing over and over. And there's a lot of stories that get left out that the children really can say, whoa, I didn't know that was there. And adults say the same thing. What at elementary retreat we had the story of the gypsy girl that Paul was and Peter were dealing with, and one of the adults said, really? I didn't know that was there. We'll talk about in Sunday school, second day of creation, and one of my adults said, I think I need to come to your class. So,
Tell them about the elementary retreat. We haven't mentioned that yet.
okay. A few years ago, our camp was wishing to figure how do we build numbers at camp. I mean, it's that thing that every Presbytery goes with. Our numbers of children are lower, the numbers of children at camp are lower, therefore revenue's lower. Joanne came up with an idea originally. We'll have an elementary retreat. We have a high school retreat, we have a middle school retreat. Went to the committee with it. Didn't get a whole lot of response. Talked with me and I said, I think that sounds great. I said, but we have to be very careful. It's not going to be on the same format as the others because we don't want them to get to middle school and I've already done that type of attitude. Yeah, we talked about it, we can do it. The committee says, okay, go ahead and try, but it'll never work. So,
more than just the committee said that.
So we set out the material and gathered up people, very few people that would help us.
Because it wasn't going to work, so they didn't want to be there.
What, the day before or 2 days before, we had 2 registrations?
The Monday before it was supposed to start, we had no registration. So we were thinking about canceling it. 2 days later, we had 70.
And I'm the queen, I never cancel. I might have to get through 10 feet of snow, but I don't cancel.
So it went from 0 to 70 in 2 days.
In your retreat, are parents coming with kids? Is it pretty mixed like that, or is it primarily elementary
We
kids?
demand. We tell them they have to have 1 adult for every 5 kids.
Okay, so you
A lot
follow
of times
ratios.
it's parents, sometimes it's not.
Okay.
But, so we do have, and adults have to participate the whole weekend, which was one of the obstacles we had to overcome.
That was just my church. They thought they were entitled to a free weekend.
But after the first one, when the adults had to participate in all the different things the kids did, then we started getting adults coming that we didn't need. So we had to kind of limit the number of adults.
But the reasoning behind it was to get these youth there, to let them see what it was to be at Bluestone. Some of them came because they already loved Bluestone. Some of them, it was an easy way to get a long weekend and find out what it was like. It did build up camp, but the thing that was exciting for us was the number of kids that come to that retreat that are not part of our presbytery, they're not part of our churches. They come with their friends and they hear for an intensive weekend the stories. And Joanne and I talked about it as it grew, and I said, you know, 1st through 5th graders, if we do a 5-year rotation, then they'll never hear the same stories, the same rotation twice, and we don't have to keep inventing it, because we keep thinking
So
somebody's
we're on
going
our
to
second
adopt it.
rotation now, which is really good.
We've nearly finished our second rotation through. This year it's stories of the places in the Bible.
But it's just a wonderful weekend. A lot of people said, oh, elementary kids can't go away for a weekend. But it's just an intense weekend where we do Bible stories and fun and all kinds of things with these elementary age kids who spend a weekend at camp. Bluestone's our camp, like your all's camp. So, Christian education in different ways, because some churches have taken that format and actually done it at their church for a weekend, the same idea. So if you get kids for a weekend, you know, whether it be at camp or whether it be at a church, still think of different ways that you can just reach kids that wouldn't necessarily hear.
And I find, you know, since Joanne's churches, there really aren't kids. My church, I do have kids. And that interaction between our church kids and their love and their openness to those kids that are not. At first, as they would come into the programs, our kids were here and other kids were here, and our adults were back here, and our older adults were over here. But as it's worked through, now they've become friends, and the mixing is great. One of the curriculums, I said I usually write my own, but one of the curriculums I use, and I brought a sample of, is Faith Alive does a program called We. Have any of you all used it, seen it?
We or we?
We, W-E. And
Faith
it's...
Alive is excellent. They have curriculum for everything. They are wonderful.
It's designed to use on a midweek program. It's not as intensive as Logos, but what it is you sit at table. The meal is not the focal point of your evening, but it is a way to gather around the tables intergenerationally. There's not a table of youth or children, or it's not even families. We're totally mixed up. And in the course of the meal, there's conversation. Then everybody as a whole group hears the Bible story. A lot of the stories have PowerPoints that go with them, and so tell around the table activities. Then each table is given a task. It might be to come up with a skit, might be to come up with a prayer. Every table has a task. And at the end of that time period, as the tasks are completed, everybody comes back together, and what you end up with is an informal worship based on whatever the theme of the story was for that night. And it's a wonderful way for all generations to work together, to play together, and unless the child is under 3, they're mixed up in the grouping. We don't say, oh, you have little children, so your children have to stay with you. Actually, they're better behaved when they don't, because they have a, you know, they're anxious to be part of it as well. We've found that as we first started working intergenerationally, one Sunday a month, we do all of Sunday school as an intergenerational activity. And at first it was like, okay, this group's here and this group's here, but by intentionally mixing and giving them, what I found is to give them mission or tasks where they begin to work together. It becomes more and more natural. Now when they come in, I don't have to give them color cards as to which table to sit at anymore, or go around and play a game that makes them mix up, because they just naturally do it. We still play some games, but it's not because I feel like I have to mix up the groups. I can't, you know, once they get used to it, it becomes something they look forward to. And we do a wide variety of things. We spent one quarter where each of the times we looked at how people in the Bible went from that patriarchal period through the time when they were in Egypt, where they learned to bake and knead bread, and further on to where they went into Babylonian exile and how the foods changed. And we had breakfast, and we had the story of those foods. We had seen the Milk and Honey cookbook. It's that whole program. We just broke it up into 3 sections. And we do the games people play. And it was an opportunity to look at, yes, we play lots of games. We played games around the table, and then we looked at some of the scriptures and some of the meanings behind what it means to fellowship together. So the thing I would say as far as particularly intergenerational activities, don't give up. It doesn't happen overnight because it's not what they're used to. But once they realize that it can be fun, and it is fun, and it is the young learn from the old and the old learn from the young. It's amazing how some of my adults will come up and say, do you know what this child said? That was really profound. And my answer always is, they're spiritual beings. Listen to them. So I think that's the biggest thing, is it doesn't happen overnight.
You want to mention this nurturing faith thing?
Oh, okay. Okay. I've got a couple handouts for you to take to read at your leisure. One of them, I'm a huge believer in experiential learning, hands-on learning. I'm not one, this is really different for me to speak for any length of time. My mode of teaching generally is to get your hands into it, to be part of it, to experience it. So there's an article, and I copied it with permission from Christian Century, just this past week, or this past month, on experiential learning in the Montessori. And they talk a lot about godly play, being in that mode, the way of the child, which comes from the Methodist Church. There's an Episcopal program. They all come down basically to the same experiential. And I find that those work well with adults as well. Godly play, it's amazing when you sit down at a table, even with a group of adults, and tell the story with the figures and let them wonder. No answers. Where does your wondering take you? The other is nurturing faith at home. One of the things that I have really worked hard with at our church is helping parents realize that you don't have to memorize the Bible. You don't have to be a pastor. You don't have to have any formal education, because by virtue of the fact that this young human being is your child, you are that child's faith nurturer. And those simple things we do at home are important. And don't bring your children to church to get all of their Christian education. So we talked about it at our meeting, our CE meeting at the Presbytery level, and said, what can we do for parents to help them? And I've been doing, the home spirit bags and all these kinds of things, but I wasn't feeling it was hitting the mark. So we decided to do this, and each of us on the committee took a month. And on the paper you'll see, they're just simple ideas that you can do at home with your child, or with your older kids, or even just as a household of faith with no children, that are ways to reinforce during the week some of those things we hear on Sunday mornings, things as simple as, I know my kids were always, I would say, as they went to school in the morning, and God goes with you. and they would got into the habit of answering back, and stays with you. And if I forgot, or we were really rushed, it was like, okay, they're standing at the car door, I'm waiting. You haven't said it yet. So those kind of rituals that we've tried to promote with our families, to know that families are the faith nurturers. It's not the church. We give you tools to take home with your children and use with your children. So those are just some ideas. Yes?
But would you agree that sometimes it takes the church for them to come together?
Oh, I do agree.
You know, leave them at home and they'll be in front of 3 different television sets.
Mm-hmm.
Bring them to the church at least.
No, I'm not saying don't bring them. I'm saying let's reinforce those faith issues from one Sunday to the next.
Oh, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned home spirit bags. What kind of things do you put in those?
You know, they're silly things. I just hang them on a hook, and a family can take them, and when it's done, they bring them back. I have one that I put a package of spaghetti and some spaghetti sauce and a dinner prayer, and the idea is for family to gather together and fix a meal together. I have one for little kids, and it's got some bubble bath and a rubber ducky, and, you know, make bath time a ritual. You know, you're in the bathtub, and one of them says, and Noah floated on the water, and one of them has a whale, and it's got Jonah's story. Just ways in family life, as you go about the things, you know, you give your child a bath every evening, you fix a meal every evening. One of them has a bank in it, and it's, you know, talks about the Jewish tradition of the miter box. And, well, we put a little bit of change in each evening, and at the end of the month or whenever, as a family, we'll decide where it's going. Just very simple things. Nothing that will take a great amount of time for a busy family, but it feeds into those things that families are doing anyway. Kind of, it came about as we had done a workshop. It was an intergenerational group on Celtic spirituality, and talking about how God is in and of everything, and the spirit bags came part of that. We forgotten anything?
Are you full-time at the one church you serve?
Yes, I am. I am full-time.
And you do all
Cradle to
Christian ed
grave,
for all
cradle to
ages?
grave, yes. But actually, my title is Director of Christian Education, Mission, and Outreach. So it's a heavy 40 hours.
We forgot to put this anywhere, but we'll give you our email addresses, and if you have any questions or want any ideas, or, you know, want some more information about anything we've talked about, feel free to email us, because I email a lot. You may not answer as quickly as I do. She still does.
I do answer.
Yeah. My email is presbyjo, Presbyjo, I'm not Presbyterian or anything, at gmail.com. And Chris's is?
Chris, C-H-R-I-S, K-U-P-C. What is it? C-H-R-I-S-K-U-P-C at AOL.
Can you spell your last name? I'm sorry.
It's R-O-G-I-L-L-I-O.
We'll do a question time here in a second. Just take some time if you have some more questions. Sometimes if you're like me, it takes 5 minutes to think of one question, and you don't want to think of it when you're on the car driving home. So we want to give you a little time. I wanted to share with you a couple things. One of the keys of its intensives is to give you things that you can go home and do immediately free. And I have a couple resources I want to share with you about that. I think one of the issues we have with modern parents is staying in touch. I imagine you have this one. And one of the easy ways you can do that is text messages. I know my generation, you can text me before I even know it's you. You know, I get numbers all the time, people texting me, and I feel bad, but I have to text back and say, who is this? But it doesn't offend me. And so there's lots of free resources you can use to send out mass text. We have a Wednesday night program where we feed parents and their kids for free. And sometimes we have to cancel that, especially this year when we've had a lot of snow. And there's a really easy way. We can just send 30 texts at once. And you can create all sorts of groups. We have a youth group, we have a music ministry, we have an all-church one. And the website is called Rained Out. Think of it like a baseball game, rained, plural, or not plural, or past tense, yes. Rainedout.com. It's free, people can subscribe, and here's the better thing, they can subscribe and unsubscribe if they get sick of it. I don't ever worry about that, because if they get sick of it, they can remove themselves from the list. They say, nonprofits say you can send people around 2 to 3 text messages a week and they will not get annoyed with that. So I really don't think you can be over texting. I literally send one out at least 3 or 4 times to teenagers because unless you put it in front of them, they're kind of like, I don't know, pets and eating. They won't remember to do it. So
We've moved from they have to hear it 3 times to now 7 times?
yes, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, the transmission theory is that you know, I don't know, we don't watch a lot of network TV, but I noticed in the Olympics, they kept seeing the same stupid commercials over and over, but you have to see them that many times to remember them. So if you think of that with kids, with even smaller attention spans. Here's another one I'd encourage you to. How many of you in here own a smartphone? How many of you know someone in your church that owns a smartphone? Okay, if you do that, there is a free app that is for an Android phone, for an iPad, or an iPhone, and it's awesome. It is called Bible for Kids. It's put out by the same people who do the YouVersion Bible app. It is amazing. It's interactive. It will play the story of creation. I'll even try to get it to do it.
In the beginning, we live in a beautiful world.
It's great. They can interact with the pictures. So if we're talking about free resources to tell a story, especially if you want to engage kids more, ask someone. I mean, it might be weird. Can I borrow your iPhone for an afternoon? They might let you do it. You can actually, we've done this. We bought really cheap refurbished Android tablets. We got them for like $100 for a decent tablet, just enough to run the app. And we've actually left them in worship for kids to play with. We've lost one. But kids do. We also put like little kid tables in our worship space, which caused quite the controversy. But we actually get letters from parents. We put rocking chairs and children's tables in worship. We get letters from parents all the time thanking us. One last thing before we turn it over to a question time. We've talked a lot about sharing resources. I don't want to just talk a big game on that. I want to actually do it. And so we are putting together an email list. We use this program here called Vertical Response as a way that you can send mass emails to a lot of different people. We want to, if you're interested in joining a list where we can list available resources to you. My church has tons. I literally have every VeggieTale you could ever imagine, and they don't get used. So why are they sitting in my closet when you can use them? You can borrow anything you want, and I know my church will give you stuff, but most stuff we'll let you borrow anything you want, just mail it back at some point in the next decade. That's really all I care. I know we're being realistic here. Maybe like we should treat it like a library, and you can check it out for a year, because any shorter we won't follow it. But I'm going to have an email list. So when you leave, if you want to join that, put your name and email. We'll put you on that list, and we'll just sort of grow that list. One last thing I want to say is, if you're interested in using resources like VeggieTales, if you have a Roku, which is a little streaming box, and you're a member of Amazon Prime, you were talking about buying things on Amazon. If you're a member of Amazon Prime, which our church does that because it gets you expedited shipping for free, they include with that service free streaming. And every single VeggieTales movie and television show is on there. So it's like having...
They also have the rock stars ones, and they have Odyssey.
Yeah. So if your church has internet access, or if you're doing something at home or a place like that, it's sometimes even cheap just to buy little Wi-Fi hotspots. They have pay-as-you-go ones that you can use, and you say, I'm going to pay $50. It gets me 4 gigs of data, and I know that's good. That's going to last me 6 months of streaming TV shows. you can do things like that, and it's really inexpensive. So let's take a time for questions. Make sure if you want to get on that resource list, I have a piece of paper here, put your name and email on that, and we will start that process. And one last thing, the idea of doing a children's retreat at the camp, we've been batting around that idea for a couple years. That's something I think we would like to do. And so if you're interested, just maybe put a note in that when you write your email down, and we'll kind of start that process of thinking about that. So, questions?
We'd be glad to help you with that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So let's take a time for questions.